The deafening blast of a car horn pierced the tranquility of Oakwood Avenue. A sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin worth more than the annual salary of everyone on the street combined swerved around a delivery truck, narrowly missing an elderly woman crossing with her walker. "Get a driver's license, Grandma," shouted Alexander Sterling, 32-year-old tech mogul and self-proclaimed disruptor of the financial industry, as he gunned the engine. His Italian leather-gloved hands gripped the steering wheel while his custom Tom Ford sunglasses reflected the morning sun. The world was his racetrack, and everyone else merely obstacles. 2 blocks away, Sofia Mendez was having the worst morning of her life. The 28-year-old community center director had just received notice that funding for her after-school arts program had been cut. Again. The 3rd time this year. "How am I supposed to tell the kid?" she muttered, clutching the letter as she walked briskly down the sidewalk. Her dark curls bounced with each determined step, her worn leather messenger bag slapping against her hip. 3 months of work, all those grant applications. The sound of squealing tires made her look up just in time to see the Aston Martin blast through a puddle, sending a wave of dirty water over her white blouse and jeans. Sofia stood frozen, mouth agape, as the luxury car stopped at a red light just ahead. Through the open window, she could see the driver laughing into his Bluetooth earpiece, completely oblivious to what he'd done. Something snapped inside her. The constant struggle to keep her community programs alive while the wealthy cruised by without a care. It was too much. Sofia looked down at the sidewalk, spotted a small rock, and before her rational brain could intervene, her fingers closed around it. "Hey!" she shouted, marching toward the car. Alexander was in the middle of closing a 7-figure deal when he heard the shout. Annoyed at the interruption, he glanced in his rearview mirror to see a woman, soaking wet and looking positively feral, approaching his car. "Listen, Richards, I'm going to have to call you back," he said into his earpiece. "Some crazy person is—" The sound of stone meeting metal was like a gunshot. Alexander watched in horror as a small rock bounced off his pristine car door, leaving a dent the size of a quarter. "Are you insane?" he bellowed, throwing open his car door and stepping out, "Traffic laws be damned. Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" Sofia stood her ground, chest heaving. "Do you have any idea how much this blouse cost? Not that you care about anyone but yourself. You threw a rock at my car." Alexander's voice rose an octave, his perfectly coiffed hair falling slightly out of place as he gesticulated wildly. "That's vandalism. That's a crime." "So is assault," Sofia countered, gesturing to her soaked clothes. "And being a complete jerk should be one too." A crowd was gathering, smartphones recording what was quickly becoming the neighborhood's entertainment for the day. Alexander noticed and immediately straightened his Italian silk tie. Public image was everything in his world. "I'm calling the police," he said, pulling out his phone. Sofia snorted. "Go ahead. I'd love to explain to them how the famous Alexander Sterling, yes, I recognize you from those pretentious billboards, drives like he owns the road." Alexander froze. She knew who he was. This was getting worse by the second. The last thing he needed was social media footage of him arguing with a dripping wet woman on a street corner. His board members would have a field day. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth, lowering his phone. "What do you want? Money for your clothes?" Sofia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Unlike you, I can't be bought. I want an apology." "An apology," Alexander repeated as if she'd asked him to donate a kidney. "For what?" "For driving like a maniac, for splashing me, for being a perfect example of everything wrong with the privileged elite." Their standoff was interrupted by the blast of a horn. The light had turned green, and traffic was backing up behind Alexander's abandoned Aston Martin. "This isn't over," Alexander warned, stepping back toward his car. "You're right about that," Sofia called after him, already planning to report his reckless driving. Neither of them noticed the sleek black Bentley parked across the street, nor the elderly woman with a cane watching the entire exchange with surprising interest through the tinted windows. "Well, well," Madame Eleanor Sterling murmured to her driver. I believe we've found the perfect match for my impossible grandson. Make a note of that young woman's face. I want to know everything about her by dinner." Little did Sophia know that throwing that rock would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. And little did Alexander realize that his grandmother, the formidable matriarch who controlled the family fortune, had just witnessed his embarrassing public display and was already formulating a plan that would horrify him. The rock had been thrown, and there was no going back. The Sterling family mansion stood like an ancient fortress on the highest hill, overlooking the city. Built 3 generations ago when the Sterlings first struck oil, it remained a symbol of old money and influence that even Alexander's tech billions couldn't overshadow. Alexander stormed through the grand entrance, still seething from the morning's confrontation. The quarter-sized dent in his Aston Martin felt like a personal attack on everything he'd built. "Mr. Sterling, your grandmother has requested your presence in the East drawing room," announced Graves, the family butler who had served the Sterlings since Alexander was in diapers. Alexander checked his watch, a limited edition timepiece, worth more than most people's homes. "Now, I have a video conference in 20 minutes. Madam Sterling was quite insistent, sir," Graves replied with practiced neutrality. "She mentioned something about the future of Sterling Enterprises." That got Alexander's attention. His grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, may have been 82 years old, but she still controlled 51% of the family business. When she mentioned the company's future, even Alexander knew better than to ignore the summons. The East drawing room was Eleanor's domain, a space unchanged since the 1960s, filled with priceless antiques and family portraits of stern-looking Sterlings. Eleanor sat in her favorite wingback chair, ramrod straight despite her age, silver, hair perfectly coiffed. "Alexander," she said without looking up from her tablet, one of her few concessions to modern technology. "You're late." "I'm actually early for once, grandmother," he replied, bending to kiss her papery cheek. "What's so urgent about the company?" Eleanor set down her tablet and fixed her grandson with a penetrating stare. "The company is fine. It's you I'm concerned about." Alexander stiffened. "Me? My division posted record profits last quarter." "And your public behavior posted record lows," Eleanor countered, tapping a manicured finger on her tablet. "Like this morning's spectacle." With horrifying clarity, Alexander realized what his grandmother was referring to. "You saw that? The whole internet is about to see it," Eleanor said, turning her tablet to show Alexander a social media post. "Tech billionaire Alexander Sterling freaks out over dented car while drenching innocent pedestrian." The video had already garnered thousands of views. Alexander's stomach dropped. "That woman threw a rock at my car. After you soaked her clothes and nearly ran over an elderly woman, who, by the way, happens to be on the board of the Westfield Foundation." Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. The Westfield Foundation was one of Sterling Enterprises' biggest charitable partners. "I'll have PR handle it." "You can't handle your way out of who you've become, Alexander," Eleanor said, her voice softening slightly. "Your grandfather and I didn't build this company so our grandson could become another entitled rich man who thinks the world exists to serve him. I've tripled our tech division's value," Alexander defended himself, "and lost yourself in the process." Eleanor sighed. "You know the conditions of your grandfather's will. On your 33rd birthday, 3 months from now, you'll either take control of the company as a married man, or your cousin Richard will assume the position." Alexander scoffed. "That archaic clause, it's not legally enforceable in this century." "It is when I control the board," Eleanor said simply. "Your grandfather believed a man needed a partner to ground him before he could lead effectively. I'm inclined to agree given your recent behavior. So what? You expect me to find a wife in 3 months? This isn't the 1800s, grandmother." Eleanor's lips curled into a smile that made Alexander instantly wary. "As a matter of fact, I've already found one for you." Across town, Sophia Mendez was trying to salvage what remained of her day. After changing into spare clothes she kept at the community center, she threw herself into work, determined not to let Alexander Sterling ruin her mood further. "Ms. Mendez, there's someone here to see you," said Thomas, the teenage volunteer who helped at the front desk after school. Sophia looked up from the grant application she was rewriting. "I don't have any appointments this afternoon. She says it's important, something about funding?" Tomas whispered the last word like it was sacred. Sophia's heart skipped. Funding was exactly what they needed. "Send them in." She wasn't prepared for the elegant elderly woman who entered her office, supported by an ornate cane that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent. "Ms. Mendez, Eleanor Sterling." The woman extended her hand. "I believe you've already met my grandson." Sophia's blood ran cold as recognition dawned. "Sterling? As in Alexander Sterling?" "The very same," Eleanor confirmed, settling into the chair across from Sophia's desk without waiting for an invitation. "I witnessed your encounter with him this morning." Sophia's professional demeanor crumbled. "Mrs. Sterling, I can explain about the rock." Eleanor waved away her concern. "Please, if more people stood up to him, perhaps he wouldn't be such a terror. And it's Madame Sterling, dear." Thoroughly confused, Sophia nodded. "Madame Sterling, what can I do for you?" "It's what I can do for you, Ms. Mendez." Eleanor placed a leather portfolio on Sophia's cluttered desk. "Inside, you'll find details of a grant for $5 million to your community center, renewable annually for the next decade." Sophia's jaw dropped. She'd been fighting for scraps of funding for years, and now this woman was casually offering her more money than she'd ever imagined. That's incredibly generous, but I don't understand." "There is, of course, a condition," Eleanor continued, her eyes twinkling with something that made Sophia instantly suspicious. "What kind of condition?" Sophia asked cautiously. "You'll marry my grandson within the month." Sophia stared at the elderly woman, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she burst into nervous laughter. "That's a good one. Did Javier put you up to this? It's not even April Fool's Day." Eleanor didn't crack a smile. "I assure you, Ms. Mendez, this is no joke. My grandson needs to be married before his 33rd birthday to assume control of our company. You need funding for your admirable community programs. I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement." Sophia's laughter died. "You're serious?" "Perfectly. But why me? Your grandson and I despise each other. We just met this morning when I threw a rock at his car." "Precisely," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "You're the first woman I've seen stand up to him in years. Everyone else either fears his money or wants it. You, Ms. Mendez, did neither." Sophia stood up, pacing her small office. "This is insane. People don't arrange marriages anymore, especially between complete strangers who can't stand each other." "It would only be for 1 year," Eleanor continued as if Sophia hadn't spoken. "After that, you can quietly divorce. You'll keep the grant, funding regardless, and Alexander will maintain control of the company." Sophia stopped pacing. 1 year of my life married to the most arrogant man I've ever met, in exchange for securing my community center's future for a decade? "Think of all the children you could help," Eleanor said softly. "The programs you could fund, the difference you could make." Sophia's mind raced. This was madness, yet the rational part of her brain couldn't help calculating how many lives could be changed with that kind of money. The after-school programs could expand. They could hire actual staff instead of relying on volunteers. They could renovate the crumbling building. "Does your grandson know about this ridiculous plan?" Sophia finally asked. Eleanor's smile widened. "He's being informed as we speak." Back at the Sterling mansion, Alexander was having an aneurysm. "You want me to what?" "Lower your voice, Alexander. I raised you better than that," Eleanor chided. "You expect me to marry the crazy woman who vandalized my car this morning?" Alexander ran his hands through his perfect hair, destroying hours of his stylist's work. "Have you lost your mind?" "On the contrary, I've found the perfect solution to our predicament." Eleanor stood, moving with surprising agility for her age. Sophia Mendez runs a community center that serves underprivileged youth. Exactly the kind of connection the Sterling Foundation needs to improve our public image. After your recent escapades. So hire her as a consultant. Don't marry me off to her like some medieval princess. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. I expect you to announce your engagement. Eleanor headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and she'll be joining us. For dinner tonight. 8 o'clock, don't be late. Alexander stood dumbfounded in the center of the room as his grandmother departed. Sir? Graves appeared in the doorway. Shall I lay out your dinner jacket for this evening? Alexander grabbed the nearest object, a priceless Ming Dynasty vase, and for one wild moment considered hurling it across the room. Then he remembered the last time he'd damaged a family heirloom, and the month he'd spent cut off from his trust fund. He carefully set the vase down. Yes, Graves, and a double whiskey. Now. As Eleanor's chauffeur drove her back to the mansion, she allowed herself a satisfied smile. Phase 1 of her plan was complete. Sophia hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no either, and Alexander, for all his bluster, would never risk losing the company to his cousin Richard. Sometimes, Eleanor murmured to herself, the young need a little push in the right direction. The chauffeur, accustomed to his employer's cryptic statements, simply nodded in the rearview mirror. James, Eleanor said suddenly, does the chef know we'll have a guest for dinner? Yes, madame, and the blue guest suite has been prepared. As you requested. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Excellent. I have a feeling Ms. Mendez might need to stay overnight after she and Alexander discussed terms. In her tiny apartment, Sophia stared at the business card Eleanor had left her. On the back, the elegant woman had written an address and dinner 8 p.m. This is insane, Sophia told her cat Frida. Completely insane. Frida meowed in what seemed like agreement. Yet Sophia found herself opening her closet, pushing aside her practical work clothes to find the one cocktail dress she owned, a deep green number she'd bought on sale for her college roommate's wedding. 3 years ago. I'm just going to tell them no in person, she justified to the cat. It's the polite thing to do. Frida's judgmental stare suggested she didn't believe that for a second. Sophia's Uber pulled up to the Sterling Mansion gates at precisely 30 p.m. She sat frozen in the back seat, suddenly questioning every life decision that had led her to this moment. This is it, right? The driver asked, eyeing the imposing wrought iron gates with visible intimidation. Apparently, Sophia muttered, clutching her worn leather purse like a shield. She'd spent the afternoon researching Alexander Sterling, tech, wunderkind, notorious playboy, and, according to several scathing articles, corporate America's favorite enfant terrible. Nothing she'd read had improved her opinion of him. The gates swung open automatically, and the Uber crept up the winding driveway. Sophia's stomach twisted into increasingly complex knots as the mansion came into view, a sprawling architectural masterpiece that made her feel even more out of place in her 3-year-old dress and department store heels. Good luck in there, the driver said as she stepped out. Looks like the kind of place that eats people like us for appetizers. Thanks for the pep talk, Sophia replied dryly, but tipped him well anyway. She'd barely reached the massive front door when it swung open, revealing the butler who'd accompanied Eleanor to the community center. Ms. Mendez, welcome to Sterling Manor, he said with a slight bow. I'm Graves. Madame Sterling is expecting you in the main parlor. Sophia followed him through a foyer larger than her entire apartment, past priceless artwork and antiques that probably cost more than her annual salary. Each step on the marble floor echoed like a countdown to disaster. Ms. Sophia Mendez, Graves announced as they entered a lavishly decorated room where Eleanor sat regally on a velvet settee. Ah, Sophia, right on time, Eleanor said warmly, extending her hand. Punctuality, another excellent quality. Alexander could learn from you. Where is Mr. Sterling? Sophia asked, glancing around nervously. Making an entrance, no doubt, Eleanor said with a hint of disapproval. Whiskey Graves for our guest. Actually, I'd prefer, Sophia began. Nonsense, dear. You'll need it, Eleanor interrupted, patting the seat beside her. Now, before my grandson arrives, let's establish some ground rules for this arrangement. Sophia perched awkwardly on the edge of the settee. Madame Sterling, I haven't agreed to anything yet. But you're here, Eleanor pointed out with a triumphant smile, which means you're considering it. Before Sophia could argue, the parlor doors burst open and Alexander stormed in, looking like he'd just stepped off the cover of GQ. Perfectly tailored dinner jacket, hair artfully tousled, and an expression of barely contained fury. Grandmother, this has gone far enough, he began, then stopped short when he spotted Sophia. His eyes narrowed. You actually came. Mr. Sterling, Sophia acknowledged coolly, accepting the whiskey Graves offered and taking a fortifying sip that burned all the way down. Please, if we're to be engaged, you should call him Alexander, Eleanor said cheerfully, clearly enjoying the tension crackling between them. We are not getting engaged, Alexander growled, striding to the bar cart and pouring himself a generous drink. This entire scheme is ludicrous. Is that what we're calling legally binding corporate bylaws these days? Ludicrous, Eleanor asked innocently. And what about you, Ms. Mendez? Do you find $5 million for your community center equally ludicrous? Alexander choked. Sip. 5 million. Are you out of your mind? Sophia straightened her spine, finding her courage. For the record, I also think this is completely insane, but unlike Mr. Sterling, I'm willing to at least discuss it. For the sake of the 300 children who depend on our programs. How noble, Alexander drawled sarcastically, willing to sell yourself into marriage for the greater good. Sophia's eyes flashed dangerously. Better than selling my soul for a corner office and a car that costs more than most people make in a decade. Dinner is served, Graves announced from the doorway, providing a timely interruption before either could escalate further. The dining room was straight out of Downton Abbey. Crystal chandeliers, hand-painted china, and enough silverware to confuse a culinary school graduate. Sophia discreetly watched Eleanor to figure out which fork to use for each course. So, Alexander, Eleanor began conversationally as the first course was served. Sophia runs the West Side Community Center. Their after-school arts program recently lost its funding. Fascinating, Alexander replied, not bothering to look up from his plate. Sophia took another sip of wine. It actually is fascinating, if you care about children having safe places, to go after school instead of empty apartments or street corners. And I suppose you're going to tell me that's my responsibility somehow? Alexander challenged. Not everything is about you, Mr. Sterling. Sophia shot back, though I'm learning that's a difficult concept for you to grasp. Eleanor beamed between them like a tennis fan at an especially thrilling match. This is precisely why you're perfect for each other. Sophia doesn't hesitate to put you in your place, Alexander. Perfect for each other? Alexander scoffed. Grandmother, she threw a rock at my car. And I'd do it again, Sophia muttered into her wine glass. Alexander glared at her. See? Violent tendencies, hardly wife material. Oh, please, Sophia rolled her eyes. It was a pebble, not a boulder. Your fragile masculinity suffered more damage than your precious car. My what? Besides, Sophia continued, warming to her subject, I'm no more interested in being your wife than you are in being my husband. But unlike you, I'm willing to make sacrifices for something bigger than myself. A heavy silence fell over the table. Eleanor watched her grandson's face carefully. For the first time that evening, Alexander seemed to be at a loss for words. The arrangement would be for 1 year only, Eleanor reminded them both. A business transaction, essentially. Sophia gets the funding her center desperately needs, and you, Alexander, get control of the company instead of your cousin Richard. Alexander's jaw tightened at the mention of his cousin. Richard couldn't run a lemonade stand, much less Sterling Enterprises. Then perhaps you should consider Ms. Mendez's proposal more seriously, Eleanor suggested. It's your proposal, Grandmother, not hers, Alexander pointed out. Sophia set down her fork. Actually, if we're negotiating terms, I have some conditions of my own. Both Sterlings turned to look at her with surprise. Conditions? Alexander repeated incredulously. You're hardly in a position to… 1, Sophia interrupted, counting on her fingers. The funding comes with no strings attached beyond the marriage. The community center's programs remain under my complete control. Eleanor nodded. Naturally. 2, we live separately. I keep my apartment. Alexander snorted. Gladly. 3, Sophia continued, her courage building. In public, we maintain a respectful, convincing relationship. No embarrassing me, no public arguments, no obvious signs that this is a sham. Fine, Alexander conceded, but that goes both ways. No rock-throwing incidents or public accusations about my fragile masculinity. 4, Sophia pressed on, the marriage remains strictly professional. No physical expectations. Alexander nearly spat out his wine. Trust me, that won't be a problem. And 5, Sophia concluded, meeting Alexander's gaze steadily. You agree to volunteer at the community center once a week during our arrangement. This time Alexander did choke on his drink. Absolutely not. Alexander, Eleanor chided, it's an excellent opportunity to improve your public image after that unfortunate incident with the swimsuit models and the yacht in Monaco. Sophia raised an eyebrow, and Alexander had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Fine, he grumbled. 1 hour a week. No more. 3 hours, Sophia countered. And you actually have to participate, not just stand around looking pretty. You think I'm pretty? Alexander smirked. Sophia ignored the bait. Do we have a deal? Alexander studied her across the table, his expression inscrutable. You drive a hard bargain. For someone who threw a rock at my car this morning. Life comes at you fast, Sophia replied without missing a beat. The corner of Alexander's mouth twitched, almost, but not quite, forming a smile. 1 year, no physical relationship, 3 hours a week at your little community center, and we convince the world we're madly in love. Just like a fairy tale, Sophia said with saccharine sweetness. Well then, Eleanor clasped her hands together in delight. I believe we have an engagement. Graves, the champagne, please. As Graves appeared with an ice bucket containing what was undoubtedly obscenely expensive champagne, Alexander leaned across the table toward Sophia. You realize you're making a deal with the devil, right? He murmured. Sophia met his gaze unflinchingly. No, Mr. Sterling. The devil is making a deal with me. For the first time that evening, Alexander's smile seemed genuine. The rest of dinner passed in a whirlwind of details and planning. Eleanor, it seemed, had thought of everything, from the strategic press release announcing their whirlwind romance to the carefully selected engagement ring, vintage, from the Sterling family collection, to the intimate wedding ceremony scheduled for exactly 3 weeks later. 3 weeks? Sophia protested. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible with enough money, dear, Eleanor assured her. Besides, we need to ensure Alexander assumes control before his birthday. By the time dessert arrived, Sophia's head was spinning, and not just from the champagne. She had somehow agreed to marry a man she had met that morning when she threw a rock at his car. A man who represented everything she despised about wealth inequality. A man who was currently arguing with his grandmother about the guest list for their wedding. I think I need some air, Sophia announced, rising from the table. The garden is lovely this time of evening, Eleanor suggested. Alexander, why don't you show Sophia the roses? It wasn't really a suggestion. Reluctantly, Alexander stood and gestured for Sophia to follow him. The Sterling garden was indeed spectacular, a meticulously landscaped paradise with stone pathways, winding through blooming flowers, elegant fountains, and perfectly trimmed hedges. Under different circumstances, Sophia might have been enchanted. Your grandmother is a force of nature, she observed as they walked side by side down a moonlit path. Alexander's laugh was unexpectedly warm. That's putting it mildly. Eleanor. Sterling once made the CEO of a multinational corporation cry during a board meeting. The man was 62. They reached a stone bench beside a reflecting pool. Sophia sat down, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. "Are we really going to do this?" she asked quietly. Alexander remained standing, hands in his pockets, staring at the water. "It appears we don't have much choice. I need the company, and you need the money." "Not for me," Sophia felt compelled to clarify. "For the center." "Yes, you've made your selflessness abundantly clear," Alexander said dryly, but without the earlier venom. A comfortable silence fell between them, the first moment all day that hadn't been filled with tension or animosity. "For what it's worth," Alexander said finally, "I am sorry about splashing you this morning." Sophia looked up in